Oh, are you in for a treat today? I am so excited to bring to the program the undeniable intelligence, the keen observation, and the intense brilliance of the none other than Mr. Chris Vaughan. Chris.
Hey.
I am so excited to have you with us today on the program. Thank you for joining us.
Very happy to be here.
You know, Chris, you and I, how long has it been? We've known each other for a long time. Is it almost maybe 5, 6 years now? It's
6
been a
years,
while.
I'd say, well, yeah.
It's been a long time. So you and I met in a particular program where we shared a lot of information with each other and got to know each other really well. And you know, over that time frame, you've done a lot of crazy, interesting things, and I have too. And what I really appreciated is staying in touch with you over all this time. So it's been, you know, knowing you has been really fantastic.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
So, and now, you know, I've watched you travel all over the world, and with your work, you travel all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this amazing company called Sequence Consulting, and you are really on the cutting edge of marketing and customer relationships and very strategic, data-driven, using data-driven information and strategies. Can you tell us a little bit more about your company and what you do?
Yeah, so Sequence Consulting, I founded with my wife, Lisa, almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And what we do is we call it marketing transformation, right? So we work with companies, usually large organizations that want to reinvent themselves in the face of the world in some way, right? Different customers, communicate in different ways, do business in different ways, different products and services. And those transformations can be really difficult, especially for large organizations. And we've, over the past 20 years, honed our skills and experience to help guide organizations through that. And it's you know, we think it's a fairly rare capability. You know, I think not a lot of people are really interested in that level of transformation, and we really are. So it leads us into all kinds of very cool opportunities to launch new things and to help clients reinvent themselves in really, really exciting ways.
What is typically the driving force between an organization that wants to reinvent themselves and transform themselves in that way?
It's conveniently enough, it's the leadership. Right? There are
Really?
people who want to take small bites at things, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? They want to they want to make the change, but with as least change as possible, right? They want to take the most conservative path. There are other leaders that have a vision and they're driven by it, right? And it involves taking big swings. And if there's a leader that's willing to take the big swing, that wants to take the big swing, that's the ideal client for us. You know, not only willing to take the chances, but to invest the resources that brings the vision to it. It really has to come from the top. Sometimes it's driven by market forces, right? The market's changed around them, or people are buying in different ways, or, you know, the internet was a big catalyst for a source of huge changes. But I would say that the people who were really able to transform their marketing were still few and far between. So it's not enough to have a changing environment. You have to have a leader who's committed.
So, you know, large scale change, you know, I come from large companies and have experienced large scale change as you know, drive that large scale change as well. What is one of the things that you have found within these organizations that is the greatest barrier to accelerating or driving that change?
You know, there's not just one, but the one we come across all the time and we spend a lot of time working on is perspective. We have a saying, you can't read the label while you're sitting in the jar. A lot of organizations are internally focused. Some of them by design, we found over the years, some of them are actually designed to be internally focused and to not look long and often at the world outside of them. And lack of perspective makes change seem even more impossible and even more scary than it otherwise would. If the only way you've ever done things is the way you're doing them, and you think that's the only way it can be done, making a leap is really asking someone too much. The ability to look outside and say, wait a minute, other people are doing this in a different way. Other people have taken this step. Other people took this step 10 years ago. We can do it too. That external perspective we find is incredibly freeing and often incredibly inspiring for people. So a lot of the work that we do is bringing external perspective to these organizations. Sometimes from our own experience, we do a lot of custom research. We do a lot of one-on-one research
Sure.
with other companies, and we bring those insights, that external perspective, back to the client, and we frame it up in a way that it reframes the problem into something that feels solvable, right? Instead of let's throw up our hands, we'll never be able to do this. It's like, well, maybe we're a 2 on a scale of 1 to 5, but if we were a 3, that would be awesome. And we can do that, right? I think it's just, making the scale of change seem possible for people unlocks an awful lot of possibilities for people. It's honestly, it's the most powerful thing we do for a lot of our clients, is to basically turn the camera outwards and look at the world around them.
I think that's a really good point you made also, in addition to looking outwards. But I think it's going from a 2 to a 3 can have incredible impact on an organization's success, instead of going from trying, if your only focus success is 2 to a 5, oftentimes you can drive failure that way. But as you said, a 2 to a 3 or a 2 to a 4, each one of those are incremental successes that have waves of influence within the organization.
And it's it activates the law of small things, right? If you always compare yourself to an Amazon or a Facebook, and everyone does, right? If you talk about e-commerce, everyone says we want to be like Amazon. You don't, right? Maybe you want to, but you don't have to, right? To be the success that you want to be, you just have to be better in certain ways. And a lot of the work that we do is around building those scorecards for people, right? What is the maturity model for your industry, from we're terrible, we've never done this before, to we're masters of the universe? Where are you on that continuum? And what exactly do you have to do to move up to the next level? And the light bulbs go off and they say, well, there may be 100 small things that we can do, but they're small things and they're doable, right? We don't have to necessarily swing for the fences. Sometimes there's a big swing involved, but a lot of times it's just the clarity around all the little things that can be done that can move you from one level to the next.
As I'm listening to you, I'm a small business owner, and I know a lot of small business owners. What you're saying is so applicable to any entrepreneur, small business owner as well. I mean, do you find that to be easily translatable to entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, and we've lived it, right? We're a small company. We've been doing this for 20 years. We've always been a small company, and it's very easy to compare yourself to, why don't we have 1,000 employees, right? And why are we making $1 billion a year? And but that's not the comparison, right? The comparison for us is, are we better than we were last year, right? Have we learned from where we were? Are we fulfilling more of the vision that we had for ourselves? And if so, we're winning.
Sure.
And some of that's about growing, and some of that's about building revenue, and some of that's about building client base, and an awful lot of it isn't. For us, it's about, are we serving the kind of clients that we want to serve? Are we doing the kind of work that we want to do? Are we actually making things change? That's the real metric for us, is, are things changing at the client because we were there? That's the measurement for success. And for us, it is always a combination of, doing small things a little bit better every year. Being an entrepreneur, stepping off the edge, that's the big swing, right? That you did it at all. I've had someone tell me over and over again, you're already a success, right? If you did that, you're already a success. And you've done something that 90% of the world will never do. What you make of that is really up to you, but it's there's no fastball you can hit, right? That's going to knock it out of the park, at least in my experience.
And I also find too, a lot of entrepreneurs think it's a cliff when it's really just a curb. And if you treat it as a curb, life would be a lot easier.
I like that. I like that analogy an awful lot. We were our story is we were kind of kicked off the curb. We were my wife and I met at a large consulting company where we both worked back in the 1990s. And in the year 2000, the company ran into trouble with the whole .com bubble and went bankrupt very, very suddenly. Like in a period of months, there was simply no more money left, and we were both left without a job. I just moved to Chicago, and we had a baby on the way, and we were both unemployed. And what do you do under that circumstance? And we wandered in the wilderness, I like to say, for about a year, and then kind of screwed up our courage and decided to launch our own consulting firm. And that was 20 years ago. But I don't know if we ever would have done it if life hadn't kind of given us that shove off the edge, where we had to overcome our fear because we felt like we had no choice. It was a pretty big curb, but it wasn't a cliff. Yeah.
It's always a curb, right? It's always a curb.
Maybe it was a staircase. I think it was like a staircase.
Exactly. So, I really consider you an amazing thinker and a brilliant thinker. I truly do. And there's a lot of we know the challenges are enormous today with everything we're facing. What are some of the things that you are advising and counseling your clients on right now based on the current situation?
The first thing that I tell them is never let a good crisis go to waste.
I love that.
I can't remember who first said that. I think I heard it on the West Wing. But I can't think of anything more true for this day and age. And I've seen clients do amazing things they never thought possible had they not been in the midst of this crisis. It opens up opportunities you never would have seen before. It injects a level of urgency you could have never accomplished before. It creates a sense of unity and togetherness that you wouldn't have been able to get before, that lets you get stuff done.
Right.
I mean, just to give you an example, we have a company that we work with whose whole business is about in-person trainings and events, none of which were possible. And they had wanted to take their work online for years and had never been able to get it done. They got it done in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, the entire program is available online, and it's awesome, and they're reaching more people than they ever reached before. I mean, had they not been put in a situation of crisis, they would never, ever have been able to do that. And we're seeing that everywhere that we look. So part of our advice to them is, embrace the crisis and look for what's possible. The last thing you want to do now is batten down and wait it out. Before the call started, we were saying that, some things will never be the same. That's absolutely true. We will turn the corner and we will come out of this, and it's going to look really, really different. Do you want to be part of you want to be on the team that's creating the change, or do you want to be on the team that's following it? And some of our clients are doing the one and some of them are doing the other, but I think there's real opportunity in the crisis, and I think it's going to open up lots of things for people who are open to receiving.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I always say is whatever crisis you looked at, whether it's the 2008 fallout or during the tragedy of 9/11, or in your case in the 90s when people were impacted negatively, those people that keep moving and trying and progressing always seems to be the ones that come out on the end much better when things start kicking off and they're ready to push the gas pedal down and go quickly, as opposed to those who are sitting back and continuously thinking about it.
Yes. I've a friend told me a long time ago that there are leaders for good times and that there's leaders for bad times. And they're not necessarily always the same people. And I think, a good leader in a bad time is, certainly, the one who can stand in front of the mast, right, and give everyone confidence, project strength and calm, but it's also the one who can steer the ship, right? We still have to keep moving. It's not about standing still. It's not about hiding in our cave. I mean, and we've had to make painful decisions, all of us, in the last few weeks about where we're going to go. But I think the sooner we can turn outward and look at what is happening in the world and where the opportunities are, not only the quicker will we recover, but I think the quicker we'll get to whatever's next for us. So that's part of the advice that we're giving our clients right now.
And good advice too. Absolutely great advice. So, you talked about leadership and good time leadership and bad time leadership. How do you find leadership in general? Do you have a definition that you use?
The definition that I like to use is it's the ability to create purposeful change, right? I mean, the measure of a leader is, are they able to really change things in the direction of their choosing, right? So it's sort of, there's a sense of power behind that, but there's also a sense of direction around that. It's the definition that I like to use. And I think that combination is rare. And those are the kinds of clients that we like to work with, are the clients that, have a direction and that they want to change in, right? And they're willing to lead the change, and they need, they need help drawing the roadmap, right? Sort of connecting the vision to action, and what are the steps that we need to take between here and there.
You talk about purpose, and I'm kind of maybe an offsider where I'm not a big fan of mission and vision, but I'm a huge fan
Me neither.
of purpose and intention.
Yes, I
And
agree.
intention, I think, and it just seems like employees can really be drawn to a purpose and intention. So when you think about purpose of an organization, and I believe every individual has a purpose in their life, and every leader has a purpose. How do you, this is kind of an esoteric question, but how do you think those leaders with their purpose and individual purpose really come into alignment with an organizational purpose?
I think they create it. I think they create the alignment. The best leaders that I've seen are there's just a real authenticity about their personal purpose.
Yeah.
There's something magnetic about that. There's something inspiring about that, and like a magnet, it sort of organizes the iron filings around it, right? I mean, that's sort of the effect that leaders like that have, and it's pretty rare. But I agree with you. I think mission, vision, those types of things always feel painted on to me, right?
Yeah.
They always feel like they're from the outside in.
Yeah.
I think purpose and intention really comes from the inside out, and it's something that if you have it, it radiates, right? You radiate from within and bring other people along. And I think some of that can be taught. I think some of the work that you and I did together was about learning how to express more of that, right? Learning how to radiate more of that, learning how to live more of that in a way that brings other people along. And I know I felt the difference in my life, and frankly, I've seen it in yours.
Absolutely. There was no going back after that, was there?
There's no going back after that, right?
Back. Yeah. Yeah. So is that part of what you bring to the leaders that you work with? Do you help them identify that purpose? Do you help them find that sense of purpose?
That's a great question. I think what's really valuable about what we do is we help them articulate that sense of purpose.
Okay.
I think they come to it with a sense of wanting, right? There's something that they want to have happen. There's something they want to create. And maybe they can see it in their mind, but they can't necessarily articulate it in a way that other people can be brought into it. They can't necessarily connect the dots between where we are now and where we're going to go. How do we get from here to there? And you have to have all those things in place to really bring people along, right? They have to get it. They have to believe it's possible, and they have to understand what has to happen between now and then for them to get there, and then they'll follow. And I think that's the service that we provide for our clients is you've got not a vision, a purpose. You have a person. We love it. Let us help you sell it, right? Let us help you, flesh it out and sell it through an organization.
So what is one thing that you would recommend for any leader to do, whether they're of a large company or a small business or a solopreneur? What is one thing that they can do to work towards really articulating or identifying their purpose when they're struggling with that?
I think keep it simple, right? I think, big thinkers think big thoughts. The most powerful kind of purpose statements or purposes that we deal with are bite-sized, right? Can you boil it down to a mantra? Can you boil it down to one thing? We're going to do X that people can get their heads around. And it's difficult for people to do that because no, there's so much more to it than that. Of course there is. Yeah. But especially as a small business, and we learned this lesson the hard way over the years of, really saying who we're for and what we're for is difficult because you feel like you're leaving things out. And you don't want to say no to anything, right? You want to take on everything. And it's a paradox I've had to learn again and again and again, which is the clearer you are, the more things happen for you, right? And the wider your net, the less things happen for you. I don't know if I can explain that metaphysically, but I know that it's true. But the laser focus really makes a huge difference. And I don't think it matters how big the organization is.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I struggle with that too, is, well, I can do everything. But I think what I've learned is that to keep my message on point, and then I can still do other things, but my message still has to be on point. It doesn't mean you won't draw in people from different areas, but you do have to stay focused. Otherwise, marketing is so challenging, or your next product becomes so challenging, your next service becomes so much challenging. But as you said, that clarity or defining just in such simple terms makes it so much easier to run a business in general.
It does. we used to get feedback from, I used to get feedback from people, it's like, well, we just don't know what to do with you, right? It's like, we know you can do a lot of stuff, but we don't know what to do. What should we say yes to,
Right.
Which really helped us, hone our message down.
So, when you have folks like yourself, you are often sought out to be someone's mentor because people want to learn from you and grow, and because especially when you've had such success as you have had. Have you had mentors of your own over your career?
I have. I've been fortunate to have many mentors over my career. I think all the way back to college and then graduate school, and my very first job in consulting, I was fortunate to have mentors that I really looked up to.
Have you had any mentors as running your own business?
Early on, I most definitely did. I most definitely did have people that I would reach out to, especially in dark times, right, when I was losing my nerve.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Help talk me through it and help me understand that was part of the process as well. And at some point, maybe I got old or something, right? And I ended up doing more mentoring than menteeing. But that's also it's also a joy. I mean, it's a real blessing to be able to work with other people.
It is. I'll tell you one thing that I have learned as I've continued to grow is I'm also very cautious about who I reach out to, because I find a lot of people don't think in as big terms as I do, and sometimes their advice and counsel is very narrow, and because they just can't see the big purpose. So I think when you get to a certain point, as you said, you become more of a mentor than a mentee, because you're better to share your information, because maybe you've just grown so much or done so much introspection. When you do the kind of introspection that we've done, a lot of people just can't understand that depth of introspection.
Yeah, I do think, and I think you get more selective, right, about the kind of advice you need, and at a certain point, it's really not just advice so much as companionship, right? Just to share, right? You want someone who can sort of be in it with you and understand what you're going through, especially at times like this, right, where no one really knows what's going on or how to feel. I think just not to be, alone in that is really important.
Yeah, it's nice to be around people who get you, not trying to figure it out.
Absolutely, that's always true. That's always true.
So you've worked with a lot of leaders. Is there a quality within leaders that you see just with every great leader that you've worked with?
There's so many, right? And some of them are the obvious. There's a certain strength about that, right? There's a certain confidence and self-possession about that. There's a certain level of intelligence, facility. I think what separates the really, really great leaders from the very good leaders is humility, actually. And I think it's really rare. There's a quote I actually printed out from the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. This is a leader's best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say we did it ourselves. And I always like that quote. The very best leaders I've ever seen actually lead from behind. And they're willing to let other people take the credit. They're willing to not know. They're willing to be wrong. They're willing to let other people take the wheel sometimes. And as long as we end up in the right place, they feel like their purposes have been fulfilled. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about them. It's a beautiful thing to see it in action. And it's very, very rare that you see that authentic sense of humility.
And I think that you're saying what you said, the authentic sense of humility, because I think we see through the fake humility.
I think we do.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. When I wrote the first book where I interviewed HR professionals who worked in global businesses and worked with leaders, and the question was, I asked them the same question, is what is the number one quality you see in great leaders, great business leaders? And by far, their answer was humility.
Really?
And there wasn't even the second was so far below, but humility just rose to the top. And I think even, and it becomes more apparent, I think, even when you get into some of these larger organizations, or when you're an organization that reaches a lot more people, you really see humility in action. And I think you're right, it becomes much more rare.
Absolutely. And it's paradoxical in times like this, right, when we're in such a crisis, and we crave leaders, right? And we want, leaders to step up into the limelight. And you get people like Andrew Cuomo, right, who I just admire the heck out of, right? And I think he's the model for what a leader needs to be. And there are others that I would point to here in Illinois. I think Jay Pritzker has done a terrific job of stacking up to leadership, or Lori Lightfoot, in ways that maybe nobody would have expected. But it goes back to my point about leaders for good times and bad times. I think when things are hard, you want the leader to stand up in the front and show us. And I think in good times, these are the same people that led from the back, right? You probably didn't see Andrew Cuomo in the news too much before these times. There was another quote I thought about for this. It was this one's from Nelson Mandela. He said, "It's better to lead from behind and put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory when nice things occur. You take the front line when there's danger. Then people will appreciate your leadership."
Oh, I love that.
And I think that's really the difference, that in times of leadership, we want the leader to take the front. And in times of calm and peace, we want the leader to stand in back. And I think most leaders, many leaders, especially in the corporate world, don't understand the difference.
Yep.
Of when to be in front and when not.
Yeah. What do you think gets in the way with that? Do you think it's the ego? Do you think it's just lack of having someone who can guide them? Or what do you think that gap is for them?
In my experience, a lot of it is ego, and there's a lot to be said for that. I think people can get a lot of drive from that. People can get a lot of energy, right, from accomplishing their personal purpose and their personal goals. I think it's very difficult for people to reach that level 10, humility, because they haven't come from there. And I think also it's not a popular model of leadership, right? When you think about leadership, you think about wartime leaders, right? You think about Abraham Lincoln, right? Or you think about whoever, in times of danger, right? We think about leadership as something that happens in crisis, not something that happens every day. And I don't know how that's taught in business schools or how it's communicated throughout corporations. But I think most people underappreciate the leaders that they don't see.
Absolutely. I was reading a story on Abraham Lincoln, and I didn't realize this, but he actually filled his cabinet with people that disagreed with him or didn't like him. So he filled his entire cabinet with people who were against him. I thought, wow, that's a bold move, but it's a good
what humility, right? What humility it took to do that. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and I'm the president of the United States.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's sort of interesting as a consultant. You're forced into that role a lot, right? It depends. Some clients, people don't even know we're there, right? Some people, they want to present the work themselves. They don't want to have a consultant. So we're very much behind the scenes.
Right.
And even when we make great things happen, right, and we drive real change, we never get credit for it. And we shouldn't. That's not the point, right? I mean, we're there to make the client look better. Yeah. But you really have to cultivate that sort of sense of humility, that it's not about us. It's not about making us look good. It's about making the client look good and doing the right thing for the organization. And it is difficult sometimes, right? Sometimes you go, no, we did that. That was my idea, Yeah. But it's absolutely not the point. And over the years, we've learned to take a sense of satisfaction that if they never knew we were there, right, then we did a really good job.
Well, and what you're doing is not just changing, one aspect of the organization. You're creating this immense ripple effect that extends well beyond the organizational lines of boundaries, which is something that feels really good about. You should, that's amazing work.
Thank you. And I think you make a good point about leadership there too, right? That influence takes time, right? Decisions can be made in the moment, but influence does ripple out through an organization. And we've had engagements we've worked on where it seemed like nothing happened, right? We would deliver, it seemed like nothing happened, and we came back sometimes years later, and they'd done everything. They'd done it all. Right? It just took time to filter through the organization. And we were talking, we'd say, my goodness, we thought you hadn't done anything. And they're like, well, we're not stupid. Of course we did it. But it takes time for those kind of influences to ripple through an organization and for people to turn the ship. And I think that's another misconception about leadership, is the leadership sort of charges in right? Points to the
Right.
west and everyone charges off. And
Yeah.
we've never seen it work that way.
No, it never does.
And when it does, we've never seen that stick, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a series of small changes and consistent influence on an organization and its values and its sense of purpose
Sure.
that really changes things. I think, there are breakthrough moments of clarity where people see it.
Yeah.
There's breakthrough moments where the right person lands in the right position and you can feel it. It's like a cosmic click in the organization, right? It's like we just did the right thing.
Yeah.
And then things start to move, the arc starts to turn. But that's how transformation really happens. It's never overnight.
The cosmic click. I love it. The cosmic.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know what you're talking about. Yes, I do. I do.
Great cosmic click.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I've been listening to you, and this crazy question came into my mind.
Go for it.
When you sit down with a client for the first time, what is one of the first questions that you ask every client?
Oh, that's a really great question. I ask them what success looks like to them.
Okay.
Right? I ask them, what's the home run?
Yeah.
Because that lets them get to their sense of purpose right away.
Sure.
Right? What is it that you're really looking for here? What would a win look like? Is a question that we always ask them. Right?
And I suspect their answer lets you know just how well they can articulate their purpose or not, and that probably determines which direction you head then.
Absolutely. And what's their motivation behind that, right? How do they see it, right? Why are they talking to us? That's another good question to ask people in any situation is, why this and why now, right? Like, why do you want to do this right now?
Yeah.
Gets to the circumstances and the reasoning behind it. And it kicks off good conversations. I think it also gets people, we like to get people past the superficial and to talk about what they're really all about and what really makes them click.
Sure.
Those kinds of questions can help you do that pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Love those questions. Love them. What advice and counsel would you give, an up and coming leader today? Because up and coming leaders, they have no source of reference for this, what they're going through right now. So what would you tell them?
I would tell them, take a chance, right? I would tell them to take risks. You asked earlier about mentors. If I think back at all the mentors that I've had in life and what they did for me that made so much of a difference was they were the ones that were always kicking me off the curb, right? They were always the ones that were forcing me to take a bigger chance, believing in me enough to give me a chance, to let me fail, right? When that's what had to happen and learn from my failures. And I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am today if I hadn't been kicked off the curb a lot. I think I spent the first 5 years of my career in constant terror that I had no business being where I was and having the job. And every year I would change my job and I would end out 3 feet out in front of my skis again. And sometimes I did fail and I made a lot of mistakes. And I also had a lot of successes and I learned an awful lot. And it changed the trajectory of my career and my life. And as an up and coming leader, I would say to seek out those opportunities, to take chances and just lower the cost of failure for yourself, right? And put yourselves in situations where, you can learn to be humble, right? Yeah. You know what it feels like to fail and you know what it feels like to be let down and develop that, authentic sense of your purpose. And you also have a lot more fun. I developed a philosophy a long time ago and I live it in my work and I live it in my life and it's why I travel so much. And it's, just say yes. Right? When an opportunity comes up, if it's not fatal or illegal, just say yes, right? The opportunity's in front of you for a reason. Yeah. And that's led me to conversations and relationships and business opportunities and things that otherwise wouldn't have been able to imagine because I would have instinctively said no. So my advice for any up and coming person is say yes.
Love it. So I have a motto that I live by. I don't know if I ever shared this with you, and I've lived by this for years, is that life should be an adventure and no one ever had an adventure sitting on the couch.
Exactly. I completely buy into it. And a part of the adventure is fear, right? Like
exactly.
If you don't feel a little bit afraid, it's really not an adventure. Like my wife likes to say, we go on all these adventurous vacations and we go off beaten path places, and she calls it the edge of fear, right? If she's not just a little bit scared, it's not a good vacation for her, right? Because that's the sense of adventure. I think that's a good lesson for life. I think it's a great lesson for business. If you're not scared, you're probably not pushing hard enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about in regards to leadership or strategic marketing or transformation that you want to share with the listeners today?
I think there's more than one kind of leader. I think when we talk about leadership, we tend to talk about organizational leadership, right? And measured by how big the organization is and the span of control and all those things, and that's important. But there's leaders in all walks of life, right? There's the thought leaders, right? And there's spiritual leaders, and there's emotional leaders, and all of them are important. I think it's very narrowing to only think of leadership as telling other people what to do.
Yeah.
I think there's many ways, using my definition of leadership, which is about creating change. There's many ways to do that. Yeah. I strive to be a thought leader. I strive to have ideas that change the way people think, and ultimately what they do. I look up to spiritual leaders in my life, right, who can open up spaces for me that I wouldn't find by myself, right? And I admire emotional leaders who can care for people, create spaces for people that allow them to grow and change. I think being clear about what type of leadership, what type of leader you want to be, makes all the difference in the world. I would probably make a very bad organizational leader. I should not be the CEO of anything big because I don't have the skill set for it, and I really don't care, right? The things that I care about are just on a different plane altogether.
Yeah.
And I think finding comfort and clarity about that is really important. And I think it's the same question of clarity around sense of purpose. It's clarity around leadership. And it's the clarity we strive to help our clients achieve in their marketing and their positioning and their communications. It's like, what space do they want to play in? We call it their way to play, right? It's like, what are you really bringing to the table, and who are you serving with it? The clearer you can be about that, right, the faster you're going to make things change.
I love it. Well, you're without a doubt a thought leader. I mean, from the time I met you, you've been a thought leader, and
thank you so much.
Whether you're putting something funny or a quirky observation of life out there, it's always great to see, because you can always tell those people that just think, I would say, think differently, right? You don't think like everyone else, but you think differently, and it's so refreshing to see. So thank you for all of your thoughts and ideas, but thank you for entertaining me on Facebook and occasionally too. I love that very much.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So,
I have fun with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, no, I have fun with it, right? To sort of, yeah.
But you have really, it's like almost like an intellectual quip fun with it, which is what I love. Like, it's thoughtful. It's very thoughtful. So one last question for you.
Sure.
I have this book sitting on the back of my credenza that I'm working on little by little. And I always ask the same question of folks, especially folks that are thought leaders. What makes you want to get up in the morning and push that sun up and get the day going? Like, what stokes your fire?
What stokes my fire?
Yeah.
It's my sense of adventure.
Yeah.
It's my sense of adventure. I wake up every day knowing I'm going to learn something new, right? I'm going to meet someone new. Yeah. I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to scare myself in some way, right? And I'll be a different person at the end of the day than I was at the beginning, in some way, and that just energizes the hell out of me. It's part of why I love what I do, is I get to talk to really smart, interesting, cool people all day long who are doing really great things. It's and it's different every single day. So it's that sort of sense of adventure and the chance to live on the edge that gets me up and keeps me going.
That's awesome. Hey, Chris, if this has been an amazing conversation and deep and sharing, and thank you so much for all of this. If there's someone out there listening and they wanted to contact you, how would they go about doing that?
You can find me on my website, which is sequenceconsulting.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. It's Chris Vaughan. Awesome.
Chris, thank you again. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise,
to spend time with you, and I feel that having met you it's been a gift. So it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep up the good work.
Great. right, thank you so much.
All right, you bet.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.